Thank you, Mr. LaFay.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court and counsel. I did say when we started this case that there would only be one issue, and there is itself. It's whether or not Mr. Apperson acted in self-defense. But take a moment, and here's the important thing. This is Mr. Apperson's day in court. The rest of us, we're all going to go on with our lives, but this is it for him. There are no other days in court for him. Just today, or just these days. So, I ask you, when you consider the evidence in this case, to begin with what we talked about during jury selection. That you begin your analysis with what the law demands. And the law demands that you believe that Mr. Apperson is innocent. Through each and every stage of this trial, unless and until the state proves him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you know, that is hard, and that cuts against the grain, really. It is, because we're all conditioned to resolve conflicts by starting out in the middle, by being neutral. That is a life experience. Not here, not in this room. The law says you cannot start this case by saying, I don't know. You have to say, you know what? It's a leap of faith. It is. You, Mr. Apperson, absolutely did not do this. And for that, we, the jury, we say to you that we will not let them have you because we believe that you are innocent, and we will believe that until it's proved beyond a reasonable doubt. And I asked each of you for a diet when we were done jury selection. I said, can you do that? Each of you said that you could. Mr. Apperson heard you. I heard you. We believed you. So, what is this proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Well, Judge Nelson is going to read you the jury instruction of what it is. We've heard some of it. It's not impossible to doubt, so. But I would argue to you that it is proof that is so compelling that a person would trust it in the most important of their affairs. That, in fact, is in the United States courts, that is the federal definition.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. Counsel's testifying as to what the standard is in another system.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will be reading to you the instructions of the law. They will be going back with you. Those are the instructions you are to follow.
But that is not here. Because this, we have the same standard. But it is proof here in this court that is so obvious and so evident that, again, if after listening to it, even if you were convinced that Mr. Apperson is guilty, even if that were to happen, if your conviction is one that wavers and vacillates, and this case is not proved beyond a reasonable doubt, and you have to find him not guilty, that means if you have any second thoughts, in so many words. And that's what they need to change your mind. So, there's one other thing about reasonable doubt in this case, and this is perhaps the most important thing. And that is because here we take a step back. You have to consider self-defense. And this is what the law says. It says that the state, the government, must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Apperson did not act in self-defense. So that means that as soon as Mr. Apperson says, look, I acted in self-defense, then you have to say, okay, we accept it. Now, state, prove that he didn't. And while you're at it, change your minds and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the essence. So, what did they bring in here to change your minds? What did they bring in here to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Apperson was not acting in self-defense? Well, they brought you George Zimmerman. And, you know, you've heard some terrible things that Mr. Zimmerman has done. He strangled his girlfriend, or he killed Trayvon Martin. He sold the gun, the murder weapon. But really, and you will hear me say this again, his latest victim, the latest and most recent casualty is the truth as far as Mr. Zimmerman is concerned. Because we didn't hear it in here. And when I say to you, based on the evidence and based on his testimony, that he is a liar, every time I say that, I never want you to think that that's my personal belief. I'm always saying that that is what the evidence and that is what his testimony shows. Because he came in here with a heap of lies piled on a bunch of half-truths. And if you listen to his testimony and you compare it to the other evidence and testimony in the case, then you come to one conclusion, and that is, and throughout, that he is a belligerent, obnoxious liar. And I don't say that lightly. I don't. But let's begin on September the 9th. At the beginning, it's just so simple. This is not anything complicated. What is the name of the passenger in your car? What other witness was there to this event? He wouldn't say, I forgot. I don't know. I reminded him that he knew the person's name back when he sat in that chair on a previous hearing. He said, well, okay. He said, well, I wasn't sure back then. I said, okay, well, in the morning I'll come back with it queued up. We can all listen to it. And then he said, well, I believe I knew his name. What does that even mean? We're just trying to get a name out of this person, out of Mr. Zimmerman. What? Okay. So, then again on September 9th, consider Mr. Zimmerman's testimony. He said, you know what? I wanted to go to Sam's Club. I needed to turn right. I needed to, but I was blocked. Mr. Apperson was blocking me, matching my speed, couldn't get over. He said, well, in your deposition under oath, you said you couldn't remember which side he was on. Your passenger side or your driver's side. So this isn't making sense. This is breaking down. And he said, well, you know what? Now I do remember. The only memory to get better with time. He said, now I remember he was on my passenger side. Recall again. You know, I asked Mr. Zimmerman a simple, these are not hard questions. What lane were you in? How did you make a right into the Home Depot? basically I said, were you in the right lane when you made the right into the Home Depot? You would have thought I was asking him to explain the theory of relativity or something. I mean, the most convoluted, evasive hustle. No one knew what he was talking about. I was never in the right, I was in the center. Just, what lane were you in when you made the right? And then nonsensical explanations about how we ended up at the Circle K, right where Mr. Apperson was. The only way to get back on Lake Erie Boulevard, the only way to get back to Sam's Club. None of that made any sense. And then he told you, I don't recall where I was in the Circle K. Because I asked him, when you went in, I took my pen and I traced the area in the Circle K, and Mr. Zimmerman was on the witness stand. And I said to him, I said, you know, you said you were going in here. Did you go in here for some reason near the Circle K, or, you know, did you go out and around back? He said, I don't really remember where I was. Okay. All right. And I said, well, would you like to look at a police report? And I also looked at the video. He said, I'm not looking at that. No. It won't help. It's not even worth a look. Can't be bothered. He knew it wouldn't help without him even looking at it. But then you heard the former police officer, Officer Tomasi, came in here. And he said, yeah, I looked at the film. No, we didn't collect it as evidence. And Mr. Zimmerman was right next to Mr. Apperson's car. Mr. Apperson told you that when Mr. Zimmerman followed him in there, Mr. Zimmerman said to him, I'm going to kill you. And so, you would have known, without any doubt, there's no doubt about it now, you would have known that right when Officer Tomasi, Mr. Tomasi, told you about George Zimmerman stopped behind Mr. Apperson's car in that Circle K, you would have known right then, because what did Mr. Zimmerman say? He said, well, I was cutting through the BP, and Matthew Apperson came running out to my car. He was screaming something, we just got out of there. We had the key, Mr. Zimmerman said, we had to drive away to escape. Just a convenient lie, delivered with the same smirk. Because you know that is not what Officer Tomasi saw. For once, there's an independent witness. And there is no reason for Mr. Zimmerman to be behind this man's car. None. Particularly in light of his testimony. So, you know that with so much at stake here, Mr. Zimmerman has just come in and lied about that. Now, I'm going to leave that particular deceit by Mr. Zimmerman hanging right here, because when I sit down, the state can come up here and talk to you again. I won't be able to, but they can. Maybe they can explain it to you. Maybe they can explain this lie. They won't. They're not going to. They'll say ignore it. It was a different day. Doesn't matter. Well, I'm going to say this. The real question is why is Mr. Zimmerman lying? Not that he is, but why? you will see a pattern over and over again and over again. And here's the pattern. Whenever George Zimmerman does something wrong, whatever it may be, whatever, small, middle, big, whatever, he always, number one, lies about it. Number two, blames someone else. Every time. Every single time. If he followed Mr. Apperson to the Circle K and threatened to kill him, he will tell you. Mr. Apperson was, at first, I didn't do that. The denial, always. And then, it was his fault. It was his fault. He was harassing me every time. He did that on September the 9th. He's going to do it again on the 11th of May. If I asked him, well, Mr. Zimmerman, you just said something to the jury completely different 5 minutes ago, or if I show him his deposition, or whatever it is, you testified differently. You're changing your story. First thing, it doesn't matter who it is. It could be me. He'll say, no, I didn't. I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. And then he'll look at me and say, you're a liar. You're the mischaracterizing. You're mischaracterizing. You've twisted up the evidence or what I said. It's your fault. It doesn't matter who it is. Me, Mr. Apperson, whoever. Probably Trayvon Martin. I'll just pick one at random. And let's fast forward. The first thing he said was, about going to the hospital. He said, I didn't give a statement to the police. And I'm just picking one at random. This happened over and over again. I didn't give a statement to the police because my priority was to go to the hospital. I said, what? Wait a minute. At an earlier hearing under oath, sitting right there, you said you didn't give a statement because the Lake Mary Police Department was corrupt. He said, I never said I wanted to go to the hospital, that it was a priority for me to go to the hospital. You're lying. Doesn't matter. Every time. It's who he is. It is his DNA. So, ask yourselves, because Mr. Apperson testified about this as well, who do you believe about what happened on September 9th? Do you believe Mr. Apperson? Do you believe Mr. Zimmerman? Who is it? Which? And it's important to pause for a moment and think about Mr. Apperson. Because one thing is clear. He's not a hothead. And on the 9th, he was, threatened. He called the police. He's like, I don't want a confrontation. I definitely don't want any publicity. And I'm just going to call the police and tell them about it. And then he said, you know what, if you're not going to cross, I won't even press charges. I'm going to go on my own way. 2 days later, he saw the same truck, same thing. It's like, you know what? I don't want a confrontation. I don't want to. This happened 2 days ago. This person tried to kill me. Let me call the police and just check it out. That's all. Maybe there's nothing to it. They said, you know what? He's got a right to be here. So, but not once did he do anything. If he could avoid it, he would. And it shows that unless his back is to the wall, unless he's absolutely threatened with imminent harm, he won't resort to violence. He just won't. And it shows that he is a reasonable person, a prudent person, and I'm not just picking those words out of a hat. You heard Mr. Stone tell you, well, you know what, the 9th is a different day, and it really doesn't matter. But that's not what the law will tell you. Because what the law says, again, that the state must prove that Mr. Apperson did not act in self-defense by reasonable doubt. So, to decide that, Judge Nelson is going to tell you that you must, in determining whether Mr. Apperson was reasonable in using force, you must look at the situation from his perspective. You must decide if the danger he was facing was so real that a reasonably cautious and prudent person would have believed that he had to shoot. Of course, he has no duty to retreat, but if you look at it, then consider the knife, because the law says that certainly is something that would affect Mr. Apperson on the 11th. So the next thing is that on May 11th, what the law says, it's a factor to take into consideration. Would Matthew Apperson, because of the threats to, mind you, to kill him by Mr. Zimmerman on the 9th, would he reasonably have believed he was in danger on the 11th when Mr. Zimmerman threatened to kill him again? And we know those threats happened on the 9th because, number one, you heard the 911 call where Mr. Apperson is saying that Mr. Zimmerman did that, and number two, he told that to the officers. He said he was going to fucking kill me, quote unquote. He followed him, Mr. Zimmerman followed him, locked him in, and threatened to kill him twice. So, consider too, how was that threat delivered by Mr. Zimmerman? How? Well, Mr. Apperson told George Zimmerman, he said, you were wrong to kill that young man, that boy. Mr. Zimmerman could barely handle my questions in here. Could barely keep his composure in here. Imagine the effect that would have had on him on Lake Murray Boulevard. Angry, enraged, do you think? And again, you could see his demeanor here. He is the only witness that Judge Nelson had to step in to try and control him. The only witness of all of them here. Imagine someone telling him he's wrong, telling George Zimmerman he's wrong for killing Trayvon Martin out on the street. He is going to react with just an overreaction. Because on the evidence, he's a bully with a bunch of guns and a lot of ammunition. The law would tell you that Mr. Apperson was right, or could clearly consider attacking to him on the 9th. And that's what the law says. And when you listen to Judge Nelson reading to you or giving you the law on self-defense, she will tell you that if you find that Matthew Apperson, because of prior threats with George Zimmerman, have reasonable grounds to believe that he was in danger. And that's where the 9th comes in. Then you also hear that, well, something else would naturally play into Mr. Apperson's mind on the 11th. And this is just setting the stage. If you find that Matthew Apperson knew or reasonably believed that George Zimmerman had previously committed an act or acts of violence, that would factor into his decision as to what kind of danger he's in. And so that's why you heard from Samantha Scheiben. And again, it was like pulling teeth to get her to testify. She's a long-term friend of Mr. Zimmerman's. But even through the filter of that friendship, and she did say, I love him, even through there, he's He's busting up her furniture with a pump-action shotgun. She said, well, he's threatened me with a weapon. He's tried to strangle me, choke me. She called the police. She was obviously in fear, but of course in here she said, no, I wasn't scared at all. I was really scared of me. Well, you can take that for whatever you think it's worse or worth. And then again, Mr. Apperson was visited by the FBI. And what do they want to talk about? George Zimmerman. So now, okay, well, they won't tell him what crimes, but he doesn't know. Could be anything. So, when we come to the 11th of May, you have to tell yourself, it is clear that the state prosecution is telling you, and no uncertain terms either. They're saying, look, for our proof, to prove to you that Mr. Apperson was not acting in self-defense, believe a liar. You know he's already lied. Believe a liar. Base your verdict on the testimony of someone you know to have lied. Right there. Just stop the action for a minute. Our laws warn you not to do that. They warn you not to believe him. And they do it over and over again. They say, well, you want to, when you consider Mr. Zimmerman's testimony, was the witness honest and straightforward in answering the attorney's question? I'm not even going to argue that. I'll let his testimony stand as he spoke it. It needs no argument. Does the witness's testimony agree with the other testimony and evidence in the case? Well, not with Officer Tomasi. We haven't even gotten to the 11th yet. Has the witness, or did the witness at some other time make a statement that is inconsistent with the testimony he gave in court? No other witness, not one of them who came in here and raised their hands to swear to tell the truth on their oath, not one was ever approached as many times as George Zimmerman with, you said something totally different under oath at your deposition or at a previous hearing. Did the witness, it's also on there, seem to have an accurate memory? Mr. Zimmerman expands and contracts his memory like an accordion, whichever way the wind is blowing. He remembered the kind of car that Mr. Apperson was driving on September the 9th. It was a two-door Honda Accord, whatever. No problems. Where were you in the BP station? Can't tell you. His memory is just another tool in the kit. And finally, when we come to May 11th, it's obvious that Mr. Zimmerman has a hatred for Mr. Apperson. And I say that because of a couple of things that came out. First, he knows that Mr. Apperson has called the police on him. That's one. Two, Mr. Apperson said, Zimmerman called him a BLM asshole on the night. And, I asked Mr. Zimmerman about that. And he said, of course he was contentious. He wanted me to refer to the BLM movement in a certain way, but just moved past that. He said, I do not associate Mr. Apperson with to quote him, in his somewhat twisted ideology with the BLM terrorist organization. No, I don't. So, you know what? We showed him his, again, somewhat, I'm just going to term it sick, advertisement to make a profit on Trayvon Martin's death. And I said, well, here you go. Right there in your ad, selling point, BLM sympathizer, Matthew Apperson. And you know what he thinks about BLM, anyone associated with BLM. He's not going to admit that in here, but he put it in his ad. That's what he thinks about Mr. Apperson. That's what he was thinking about him on May the 11th. And he cannot even control himself in here about that topic, much less any U-turn. Now, I don't want to plumb the depths of Mr. Zimmerman's politics. Frankly, who cares? But it is important to think what he would do to someone who's honking at him and calling him names who he considers to be a BLM terrorist. I think he'd be angry, rash, violent, perhaps quick to pick up a gun. Because on the facts, here it is. George Zimmerman is the terrorist. That's the facts. So let's talk about who made the amendment. Okay. Well, you know, first we started with when Mr. Zimmerman left his house. Very simple, not complicated issue. And he told you perhaps some strange testimony. He said, I know, approximately 12:38, 12:42. That is strange. Time frame, but I said, well, you know, you previously said under oath that you left at 12:30. Excuse me. May I take a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
You previously said that you left your house at 12:30. That was at the hearing. And then you said around 12:30 at the deposition. So why would you not be truthful about that? It's 1 to 2 minutes to that intersection, as I told you, at Greenwood. Here. And then he told you it took him he saw the deputy up here, it took him 5 to 7 minutes in traffic to get down here to Waymont. So why is he, what's up with the time? Because there's always a reason. Well, and let's just spot him 5 minutes. Just say, okay, this is what you should never do, because his testimony must be heavily scrutinized. Just spot him 5 minutes. Well, that would put him at about 12:39, plus just the 5-minute spot, 12:44. He said that U-turn. And that's even giving him the extended time of 7 minutes. I'm not even going to this 5 to 7 minutes. Make it as long as you want, 7 minutes. So that's 12:40. Spot in 5 minutes. Just for nothing. 12:45 set the U-turn. That's 4 minutes to get to Officer Cole now, isn't it? He's got to make up that time. Where was what? Where's the time gap? What were you doing for 2 or 3 minutes? What? What were you doing? Calling your attorney? Hiding firearms? What happened here? Well, the time doesn't match up. But then again, he says that, you know, let's just go back to how Mr. Zimmerman says to start. He says, I'm on Lake Erie Boulevard, and Mr. Zimmerman, Mr. Apperson is somewhere in here, and he's following me, honking, flashing his lights. Okay, the first thing is that, it's very clear that Mr. Apperson was never up here. He was coming the other way, and he did a U-turn here. He was never even up here. But, okay, Mr. Zimmerman says he was. All right? So, you look at the post office photos. This is what Mr. Apperson says. He says, I saw the truck come and looked familiar, so I pulled up close to it. And Zimmerman, he saw the sticker. Zimmerman slammed on his brakes. And, and then they went forward to the U-turn. But if you look at that first post office photo, you'll see Mr. Zimmerman traveling alone. You won't see Mr. Apperson behind him at all. Not at all. It's only in the second photo that you see Mr. Apperson coming up behind him. And that's exactly what Mr. Apperson said. Totally inconsistent, surprise, with what Zimmerman said. So then you get to the U-turn. They have an argument, there's name calling. The state has fairly told you to find Mr. Apperson guilty for calling him a fat motherfucker. I mean, that's what they've asked you to do. Well, let's just take a moment with that, because if you'll recall, Mr. Zimmerman was saying, well, I was the one threatened. Mr. Apperson says, he told me he was going to kill me. So, what? Well, again, let's talk about Mr. Zimmerman's penchant for, again, if he does something wrong, he lies about it, and he blames the other person. Okay. Well, the first thing is that when George Zimmerman was up there talking about this threat, I said, so, and he told you, he said, I was scared. I said, well, again, under oath in your deposition, you said that you were not in fear. So we got some ramble from him about being in fear. I'm just like, here, do you need to see it? Here it is. And again, so he's inconsistent, lying about that. Mr. Apperson, on the other hand, the first thing he did was he told Detective Hernandez about it, and he also told the 911 operator about it. We got on the phone with 911. That Mr. Zimmerman had again threatened to kill him. George Zimmerman tells you that he was waiting for traffic to clear. Wanted to just get back to the deputy. Think about that for a second. He says the deputy is 30 seconds away. Well, it took him 5 to 7 minutes to get down there. How's he think that? How? You just told us that you traveled 5 to 7 minutes from this intersection to here. And now it's going to take you 30 seconds. Okay. Well, again, the clock is probably like Mr. Zimmerman's memory. It's whatever he wants it to be. So, now it's 30 seconds. You would know that Mr. Zimmerman was not in any rush to get out of that intersection or that union. Not at all. We watched that post office video, and you could see the seconds click. 15 seconds. No traffic. And he'd already been there for 20 seconds. Didn't pull out. Didn't get back on Lake Erie Boulevard. Not at all. He is not in any rush to get to any deputy. That is the conclusion there. And you know what? In that time gap, who knows what was going on in that car? But I'm telling you, he's pulling out that Springfield and thumbing back the hammer. Now, 20 seconds later, by that post office video, you can see him going westbound down Lake Boulevard. So what does he tell you? He tells you that from when he started going westbound, the shot was 10 to 15 seconds later. And he said, well, and I said, well, go ahead. You may remember I said, it's your estimate, Mr. Zimmerman. You want to change it? Change it. You want to? Just change it for the jury. Let it be whatever you want. He said, no, I'll stick with 10 to 15 seconds. 10 to 15 seconds from this U-turn. Here. 10 to 15 seconds to travel to here, still on the post office camera where he said you could see Mr. Apperson pulling up next to you. It was side by side, and that's where the shot happened. 10 to 15 seconds to go the length of one building. Spot him in 5 seconds. Let's make it 10. Give him a break. 10 seconds in a car drive the length of one building. Well, again, you can say he's not in any hurry. And that's what Mr. Apperson told you, that he started just crawling down the road, 5 to 10 miles an hour, going nowhere. And then he, Zimmerman, sped up when Mr. Apperson tried to pass him. Why would he be going 30 seconds down the road if that's it? You want to buy his clock to a deputy. He doesn't even know if the deputy's still there. Remember what he said? He said, I thought the deputy was there to catch light runners. Well, if the deputy's there to catch light runners, if the deputy's catching a light runner down somewhere involved in a traffic stop, he's not going to be at Trailhead Park. So, but, and the idea that perhaps he might, Mr. Zimmerman said, well, let me take a chance and see what if I can get down there. Then he gets in the left-hand lane to make this 30-second drive. Now, that makes no sense at all. None. And it's not ever going to. Or, excuse me, why didn't he get in the right-hand lane? Because if he's in the left-hand lane, his pistol is on his right. He's right-handed. And the window, the passenger window is on his right. He would not want to be in the right-hand lane because then he's going to point a pistol. It's going to be out the window. And he doesn't want any witnesses. Now, his window's up. So now the question is, ask yourself, because this is it. We're here. Did George Zimmerman pick up that Springfield or the Glock and point a pistol out his window, or excuse me, at his passenger window while Mr. Apperson was passing by? That is the question. The state now has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they did. Well, and again, we don't have to. The defense doesn't have to prove it. We don't. They have to prove that he did do it. And if you have a reasonable doubt, then Mr. Apperson is not guilty. But here are the reasons why you know that he did, that he, Zimmerman, picked up a pistol and pointed it out the window. Here's why. Number one, it's George Zimmerman. That just goes with the territory in this case. But number two, every single thing that George Zimmerman said about those pistols is a lie. And you ask yourself, why would he lie so many times about the pistols? Why? First, recall, he's got a holster on his belt for that Springfield. He gets in the car, he told you, I put it on the magnetic clip by my right knee. I asked him, he even said it with the prosecutor. It's in a magnetic fast draw clip. And what is that magnetic fast draw clip? It's screwed in, because I asked him, it's something that's screwed in to the outside of the console. Yes. Now, why would Mr. Zimmerman tell you that? Because he has got to explain in one way or another how that specific pistol got put into that hidden compartment. And he's only got one explanation for it. And here it is. I did it for officer safety. When the officer was coming up to the car, he said, this gun is visible. Let me put it away in a hidden compartment so there's no danger. So that's the reason it has to be on that magnetic clip. Because the only other reason would be that he had it in his hand and he's putting it in that hidden compartment to hide the evidence. So it's one of the two. Well, go to Detective Hernandez's testimony. She said, I've been a detective for a lot of experience, searched a lot of cars. Pretty thorough. And I asked her, was there a magnetic clip screwed into the console? Was there a magnetic clip at all? No. No, there wasn't. Well, and you can look at any photo you want of the inside of that car. There are a lot of them. Go ahead. You won't see any magnetic clip. It's not there. And that's why Detective Hernandez said on her oath, that means something to her, that it's not. So, why this blatant lie? So, pause a moment, because consider now what the state is asking you to do. They are asking you to convict this man on the testimony of now a serial liar. It's so, this particular one is so easy to expose. I would say on the facts, Mr. Zimmerman just can't help himself. The clip, the magnetic clip, does not exist. So somehow now you would think somehow that pistol got out of his holster because there's no clip on the console. How did it get out of his holster? How? Because he picked it up and he pointed it at Matthew Apperson. That's how. Why is it in a hidden compartment and, with a round in the chamber? And you remember Mr. Zimmerman's testimony, well, this particular weapon, the hammer is always back. It's the design of the gun. It must be. Can't be any other way. It has to be that way. You remember what Detective Hernandez said? I asked her, and I use this verb specifically, when you found the pistol, was the hammer thumbed back? She said, yes, it was. Thumbed back. It's not this is the way the pistol is. So, and you never heard Detective Hernandez say, this weapon, it's the only weapon in the planet, but it has to have the hammer at full cock. It's the way it is. So then ask yourself about this hidden compartment. How did it get in there and why? Because the police missed it on the first search. They basically missed it on the second search. They had to go back. They're still in the second search, but they tried again, and they still couldn't find it, and they finally found it. Now, no, there's only room for one pistol in that compartment. Only one. And so the problem for Mr. Zimmerman is that he is trying to get rid of all the evidence in the car. That is to say, both pistols. But he's only got room for one in that compartment. And while we're on the subject of whether this is a hidden compartment, please recall, the little exchange where I had to come back up here and ask Detective Hernandez, hey, Detective Hernandez, who's the first person who called this as a hidden compartment? She said, I did. And do you consider it to be a hidden compartment? Yes, I do. Because it was. So, now, he's got another problem. He's got to get rid of that lock. The lock has got to go. So, somehow the Glock finds itself in a backpack. We know that instead of calling 911, well, one of the people he called was his best friend. And we know, too, now, because this is not hard to piece together, because this is what Officer Call said. Officer Call said, I got to the hospital, and lo and behold, Mr. Zimmerman's best friend was there saying, I'm here to collect that backpack. And Officer Call says, well, what do you mean? Why? What's in it? He says, well, there's a pistol, and I'm supposed to get it. How did that all happen? How did it happen that Mr. Zimmerman decided to call his best friend to meet him at the hospital to get the Glock? And why? And, George Zimmerman said, well, I have a lot of reasons to have the backpack, and I have a lot of things in the backpack, too. I asked Officer Paul, I said, is there anything else in that backpack except for that pistol? I had to show him the report. He said, no, there wasn't, just the pistol. So, again, does George Zimmerman's testimony agree? No, it's never going to prove any other testimony in this case. But we really come down to, why is he hiding and disposing of pistols? Why? That's pointed one of them to Mr. Apperson. That's why. There is no other reason for that. None. That shows a guilty mind. And that's what he was thinking. So now you would say to yourself, well, what about that Mr. Zimmerman decided not to make any statements at the time? What about that? After he shot, you heard, or after the shot went in, you heard that Mr. Zimmerman said he sat for 10 seconds there on the road. Okay? 10 seconds. He called 911, his cell phone was right there. See, he was mounted on the dash in his pocket. He said, I believe I was shot. I believe you're shot. You're not going to call 911. You were going to sit. No, he took the time per Officer Call to put on his hazard lights. It's not that he just sat there shocked. No, he put on his hazard lights. Now, how long was he there? Well, there's that gap in time. Who knows? His testimony is 10 seconds, but the times aren't figuring out. So what's he doing just sitting there with his hazard lights on? Well, he's on the phone. Police attorney. Because he has to get ahead of this situation. And that's basically what he told you. He said, look, in the Trayvon case, you heard him mention this. I didn't lawyer up. I didn't get ahead of it. He's getting ahead of this one. Whatever happened to Trayvon Martin, no one will ever know but George Zimmerman. But here, he's got a problem. And the problem is this. Number one, there was a shot in his window. That's true. But there's a person who has called 911 on him, called the police on him twice. A person who has complained that George Zimmerman is threatening to kill him. And George Zimmerman knows this, and he also would know at that time that he pointed a pistol at Mr. Apperson. And he doesn't have a story ready. He hasn't concocted anything yet. He needs time. He has to, he's got to collect himself. He's got to get rid of the pistols. He has to not give a statement. Not yet. He's got to get with his attorney. So he does. But here's the thing. The police are now involved. It's 12:49. Detective Hernandez comes in. You know that nothing that Mr. Zimmerman says is ever going to make any sense about this, and nor did it. This is easy. And let's just back up. This is easy. This is not hard. What would a statement entail? A statement would entail this. By a person who had been really just driving, even having an exchange of words. Look, I had an exchange of words. George Zimmerman would say, look, police officers, you know me. I'm George Zimmerman. You know I always carry a pistol. It's here. Okay, so you know I always have one, but it's still in my holster. I didn't pick it up. I didn't draw it. I couldn't do anything. This guy just shot right through my window. He threatened to kill me and shot through my window. Let me tell you what happened. This is complicated stuff. Somebody, if that actually happened to him, but it didn't. He didn't have that ready. He knew what had happened. He knew, and he knew he couldn't do any talking. So, that's why he told you that, you know what? I didn't call 911. It calls 911, he's got to speak to the police. The operator's going to say, what happened? And he's got to say, that's never going to happen. Until he's got something figured out. So, then, you know, he needs, again, time. So when Michelle Hernandez, the detective, comes, he doesn't say anything to the police, of course, we're there, but when Detective Hernandez comes, he says, you know what? Yeah, get out of here, you blonde haired bitch, whatever he says. Now, and he told you that the reason he didn't want any photos taken was because he priority to go to the hospital. Well, the first thing is recall, and remember what Officer Call said, because I asked him, hey, did Mr. Zimmerman, was he going back and forth and going to the hospital? Yes, he was. But the big priority was not to get to the hospital. That's not what Officer Call said. But, you know, here he said, well, you know, I got to get to the hospital, among other things, to document my injuries. Well, you know, Detective Hernandez showed up with a camera to document the injuries, but no, not that kind of documentation. That doesn't make any sense. And then he said, you know, she didn't really ask me to give a statement, just wanted photos, and I don't recall ever being asked for a statement. Well, and you know what? George Zimmerman, did not know that she was a police officer. Okay. And, you know, I asked her, I asked Detective Hernandez, I said, well, did you have your badge around your neck? Yes. Did you introduce yourself? Yes. Did you ask him for a statement? Yes. It's just another series of lies. And you have to ask yourself, why? And just recall what Detective Hernandez said. She said, perhaps the truest words said that day, anywhere around Mr. Zimmerman. She said, you're acting more like a suspect than you are a victim. And that's the truth of it. You know, Mr. Zimmerman said he had to go to the hospital to document his injuries. And you've certainly seen, you know, injuries to his arm. His arm, his shooting arm, is peppered with small bits of glass. Why is that? Why you're driving? Why wouldn't you have the same peppering on the side of your neck, or you're turning and looking all over the front of your face? Why is there just one or two large pieces of glass? I think there's one. Really, no facial, no neck, just that arm. just that shooting arm. And this is their proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not, you'll hear an instruction from Judge Nelson, it's not the quantity of witnesses, it is the quality of their testimony. There is quality. I want to now speak to you about the window tint. Because, you know, you heard the prosecution tell you he couldn't, never mind what he did with the gun, the statement about Mr. Apperson could not have seen. No way. I think it was no way, no how. All right. First, when Mr. Apperson is down speaking to the police at this police station, he says, I know there wasn't a passenger. How do you know there isn't a passenger? How could he possibly know that? How? How would he possibly know there's no passenger? You can't see in there. How's that possible? Because that's what he told Detective Hernandez. How would he know? How would he know there's a gun in the car? How would he know? He says, you know, Mr. Zimmerman pointed a gun at me. How would he know that? How, by coincidence, look at the draw, you think there was a gun in the, well, there were two guns, but there were guns in the car. How? What? Again, just blind luck. Well, imagine Mr. Apperson just saying, well, I better bet there was a pistol in the car. I heard the police tell me one time that there was before 8 months ago, so I better take my chances here, and if there's not, well, I guess I'm out of luck. Flip a coin, do something. No, that didn't happen. He saw it, and that's why there was one in there. Every witness who said, I can't see in the car, every one. You know, here's a set of photos from Mr. Bigley. There you go. He's looking at the car. And of course, they have all the sun. They have the sun blocked here. There's doesn't seem like it's overly sunny, but whatever. They've blocked the front window. Okay. Here you go for an even clearer photo. That's when Mr. Bigley was looking at the car. They made sure no light coming in. And even with no light, as I said to Mr. Bigley, well, I know, Mr. Bigley, that you're just, you know, like all the state witnesses, going to say, no, I can't see in any of the windows. Can't see, can't see, can't see, can't see, can't. I said, well, the back window here, I mean, you got this stuff, you got the headrests, and even with the sun blocker on, I mean, you can see stuff in there. I mean, how about it, Mr. Bigley? He said, well, you know, yeah, can, yes, sorta. And that's with the sun blocker on. So what about Officer Call? What's he looking at? I mean, let's go back to that day. Well, no, there you go. There you have it. Let's make sure to block all the light in there and then say we can't see anything. But, you know, even with them blocking the light, you can still, even with no light coming in, you can still see the officer at the other side there. You can see that officer's arm, you can see that officer's figure, and there he is, standing there on the other side of the door, even with the front windshield blocked. Well, okay, all right, but nobody, we can see in the photos, but no, they can't. That's just the way it is. It's the power of Kodak. if it weren't so serious in here, it'd be comical. And then I asked, well, pause for a moment. You know, the other thing is that you recall that Mr. Apperson said, you know, Mr. Zimmerman swerved towards me. And remember what Mr. Bigley said, the crime scene tech? He said, this shot, the cars were very close. Very close. And they were. The closer you are, the more you can see. And that matches up with what Mr. Apperson said. So, no one of their witnesses ever looked in that window coming up from behind with the sun coming in the front. No one. And I even asked Michelle Hernandez, or Detective Hernandez, I said, did you ever take a photograph of that window? The sun coming in the front from basically what would be behind the passenger's rear shoulder or coming up on the side. Did you ever do that? She said, no, we never did. Let me briefly speak about the investigation itself in this case. No one ever investigated as to whether or not Mr. Apperson fired in self-defense. It never happened. And I asked Detective Hernandez, you know, when George Zimmerman finally came in 2 days later with his attorney, did he even get asked a hard question? No. Did you say to him as soon as he sat down, Zimmerman, you are who you are, may have done violent things, may have threatened the Lake Mary Police Department to have a report that you threatened this man before. But you, Mr. Zimmerman, you're the victim, you have nothing to worry about. They said that before they even questioned him. So that means that it was there, the police had already made up their minds without having even asked him one question. How is that? I think they call that in the verbiage a rush to judgment. Whatever. You know, he got asked one question in that interview. Did you point a gun at Mr. Apperson while you were exchanging words? There's no even allegation. No one's talking about that. Did they ever ask him, did you point a gun at him or around the time of the shot? They never did. They couldn't even bother asking. And then, did they ever ask him, hey, how did that firearm, why are you getting rid of the clock at the hospital and the firearm in the hidden compartment? Never, not one question. They couldn't be bothered. And that's why, one of the reasons why we're here. But you want to know what? In this case, where I stood up before you on Monday and said that this man fired one shot into Zimmerman's car. He did it. And he had every reason in the world to do it. We spent 3 hours in here with expert testimony. They paid thousands of dollars. They had 2 witnesses on the trajectory of the shot. It went in the window, it hit over here. Was that ever even contested? No. No, it never was. But they can't even ask one question about his right to self-defense. Even though he is telling every police officer who he can find that he fired in self-defense. Doesn't matter. And this is what they brought in here to change your mind. This is their evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the testimony I can't even, of a person who lies about lying, in short. It's a layer cake of lies. Mr. Zimmerman, did you say no? you're not telling the truth. You changed your testimony. No, I didn't. That's a lie upon me. That's what they brought in here. Well, and how many times did you see me look at my watch and say, well, you just said a minute and a half. Whatever. No, I didn't. So let's talk about the law of self-defense. When George Zimmerman pointed a pistol, which is the inescapable conclusion in this case, at Mr. Apperson, the law says that Mr. Apperson can resort to self-defense in certain situations. Pointing a pistol at someone is aggravated assault, and you've already seen what the elements are and what is. You threaten somebody by pointing a pistol in their direction, then that is aggravated assault. If Mr. Apperson believes that he is going to be the victim of aggravated assault, the law says he has every right to use self-defense. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, never mind aggravated assault, if Matthew Apperson believed that he was in imminent danger of great bodily harm or death, then he has every right to pick up his pistol and ask yourself this, because it may come up that the state may say, well, the window was shut, so he's pretty safe now. I mean, really. Ask yourself. First, Mr. Apperson told you, I didn't know if he was going to shoot through the window, roll it down and shoot me. I didn't know why. I was scared to death. But ask this question. Who would not be in fear? Who would not feel that death or imminent harm was imminent if that person saw a pistol pointed at them after someone just said, I'm going to kill you? Now I add to the equation. Say the person that said, I'm going to kill you before. Now add to the next equation. It's George Zimmerman. Who would not think who would not be in fear of death or great bodily harm? Who would sit there and ponder whether or not George Zimmerman is again going to put 6 pounds of pressure on a pistol, window or not? Who? I'd like you to contrast George Zimmerman's testimony with that of Matthew Apperson. Yeah, he has no obligation to take it to the stand, but he did. Now, I want you to consider something about him. You would think, is he being truthful? Is he? I told you what happened, but consider this about Mr. Apperson. He's going to tell you the truth if it helps him or hurts him. He's not going to prevaricate. He's not going to equivocate. He's not going to shuffle around up there and mince words and duck and all this stuff that you saw. He will tell you the truth. It helps him. It hurts him. So it may not help his case for him to say, yes, I told him that motherfucker. Doesn't help him at all. But that's the truth. And you should believe it. It's not there. He's just there to say, this is the truth. It may not help his case to say, look, when George Zimmerman threatened to kill me at that U-turn, I picked up my pistol. Now, he never said he kept it in his hand the whole time. But he said, look, I picked it up then. Doesn't help him. That's the truth. Believe it. He won't lie and he won't spin. He is the person on trial. And that's the sad part. Zimmerman, he's got nothing to lose, but he always will. He will always dip into a grab bag of lies. Again, it's his DNA. So Mr. Apperson had nothing to hide either. And so when he tells you saw that pistol was pointed at him, believe him. He had nothing to hide. He ran to the nearest pedestrian. He didn't have a cell phone. He said, please, please, please call 911. He got on the 911 call. He said, you know, George Zimmerman, first thing, pulled a gun on me. First thing. He was out at the scene. He's with the police officers. The Officer Gower said, he really was trying to talk to us. And we're like, no, just wait, please. And, you know, he told Officer Peets, he had it in, the guy has mental problems. He pulled a gun on me. It ain't going to happen. He told Officer Cowler, I did not want to have to do that. I did not want to have to do that. He pulled a gun on me. I hope I didn't kill the guy, but at the same time, it could have been me. Okay? Now, and he told Detective Hernandez, I just didn't want to do this. Now, you heard the state telling you about the interview, and they said, you know what, let us stay forward and tell you why he's guilty. Because he didn't get his direction of travel right, and he messed up the 7-Elevens. Well, and Mr. Apperson said, look, I was sort of in a state of shock. I was upset. My ears were still ringing. I was confused. You know, he got it turned around. He's not even telling him which way he's going correctly. Now, why would he just lie about that? It's a momentary confusion or shock or whatever. But the 7-Eleven, he doesn't have any duty to retreat. He doesn't have any duty to back off. Even if you say, okay, you don't know which way you're going, okay, that's a big issue. It's not, but he doesn't have any duty to back off. He doesn't have a duty to retreat. It's in our laws. And all of you said that you could follow that. I would like you to contrast his honesty with George Zimmerman's performance. And also know, you picked up that pistol at the U-turn. Why didn't you shoot them? Why didn't you? Why not? It's not a moving target. I'm going to shoot him, so now's a good time. Why not? He didn't raise his pistol then, and he didn't use it. There's no testimony that he even kept it in his hand, but again, he didn't because he had not seen Zimmerman with a gun yet. Now, you're going to get some verdict forms in this case, and Mr. Stone may have showed them to you. What the law says about the verdict forms, and I'm not going to go through them before we get them, but it basically has a series of check marks. And what the law says is, you know, you should first see if the state has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the highest defense charge. The law of self-defense goes to each and every one of these counts. So if you find that Mr. Apperson acted in self-defense, your verdict would be not guilty. However, here, there are things called lesser included offenses. We're not asking for lesser included offenses. Mr. Apperson is asking for justice. And a lesser included offense would be half justice, and half justice is no justice. Justice in this case requires or demands one thing. And I ask you for this or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Yes, Your Honor.